Russian forces have launched a major military assault on Ukraine with missile strikes and explosions near major cities. But how do Ukrainians on the ground feel? Well, let's speak to Nigeria's former ambassador to Ukraine, Frank Isoh. Now, Your Excellency, let's talk about this issue of the invasion and how Nigerian nationals and others who are there will be affected by such an invasion. We've seen the federal government actually asking people to take care of themselves. Shouldn't the embassy be doing more than just giving what looks like a mere advice?
Thank you very much, Mr. Sambo, and good afternoon to viewers. Yes, actually, the embassy should be doing much more than what is done so far. So the idea of leaving those young stars, to fend for themselves, in a critical situation like this, it's not to be recommended. And I understand the embassy itself does have some difficulties. Today, I tried to reach out to the embassy because some distraught parent tried to reach me and was worried about her ward, in Ukraine. And they wanted me to help them, get some numbers, to read the embassy. I did that, and the young woman, spent over 1 hour calling and calling. There was no response, but I just told her to continue. And eventually she was able to read them, and they just advised her to stay indoors, and if there was any update, she would be adequately informed in due course, But I want to believe the embassy probably would have reached out to Nigerian students and Nigerian residents in that country. While I was there, we had a channel of reaching out to Nigerians, through community associations and all that, I want to believe the embassy probably, should have done that by now too.
Let's just, by default, understand what the population of Nigerians in that part of the world is, including, if by chance you can talk about the population of Africans in that country too.
Well, generally, while I was there, my concern mainly, was with the Nigerian population. I was the only black ambassador there, the only African ambassador, and I used to help out, dealing with other Africans, whatever they had problems. But my major concern was Nigerian, was the Nigerian population. While I was there, the student population was about 6,000 thereabout. And then if you add about 2,000-3,000 Nigerian residents there, so we're talking about 8,000 in number then. But I want to believe by now, that number would have increased. And the reason for this, is that education is very cheap in Ukraine, and they're very good at what they do. So that is a lure for Nigerians coming there. So I want to believe, the number would have exceeded 10,000 by now.
Interesting indeed. And let's just talk about why this war was, a war that a lot of people thought was avoidable suddenly just began this morning. I mean, a lot of people globally had thought that Russia had decided to stay back, but we could see the Russian president supporting some of the regions, separatist regions in the country. In 2014, we had a similar exercise where Crimea was annexed from the country. Tell us why Russia is so much interested in just invading this country.
Well, to answer this question, I think I have to maybe do a little bit of history, because the narrative out there is just that Russia has invaded, this number of soldiers has been killed and all that, but people haven't really gone back, to understand why Russia is so passionate about making sure that Ukraine doesn't leave her sphere of influence. If you permit me, let me just go back, to the outset of the Second World War. If you recall, there was agreement between Hitler and Stalin before Poland was invaded. But hidden from the international community was a secret agreement on how to carve up Poland. In that agreement, Hitler took the west of Poland, while the east of Poland went to Stalin. So when Hitler invaded, automatically, Stalin also invaded and seized that part of Ukraine. Sorry, that part of Poland. And that part is now what is Western Ukraine. They've never felt any affinity with the Russians, because their association with Russia started only in 1939. But for those in the East, you have ethnic Russians, those who were born by Russian parentage. They speak Russian, the society is highly dichotomized. In the central part and the western part, you have mainly Ukrainian-speaking citizens. But in the east, you have those who are Russian-speaking. In my interactions with Nigeria during my visit to this part of this country, it was obvious that people in the east never tolerated anybody who spoke Ukrainian language, and vice versa in the west. So it was easy for Russia to foment trouble in eastern Ukraine because of ethnic Russians who were living there. Now, but how did this come about? The president, while I was there, was Yanukovych. He was pro-Russia. He has stopped the discussion between Ukraine and the EU on working towards membership for Ukraine in the EU and other institutions like NATO. And this didn't go down well with people in the West. And that was how the protest started, popularly known as the Euromaidan protest. And that protest saw to the ouster of Yanukovych, a pro-Russian leader. This didn't go down well with Russia. And Russia has felt that Ukraine is part of its soul, so to speak. I will never allow Ukraine to be independent to the extent of wanting to join the West. So what Putin did was, first of all, to annex Crimea in 2014, and barely 2 months after, the rebellion in the east started. And that's been the genesis of the crisis we face today. Now, the key thing for Western Ukrainians is the notion of another country trying to tell them how to run their foreign policy. This has not gone down well with them. For people, who've lived under tutelage for a very long time, they've enjoyed just about 30, 31 years of independence in their entire existence of over 1,000 years. So the idea of losing that freedom by being under the perpetual control of Russia is something they cannot stomach. And of course, the West is on their side. But the problem here now is that nobody can challenge Russia, as it were. Boots cannot be put on the ground, by the Western forces, because Ukraine is not yet a member of NATO. And this issue of sanctions can only work for a while, if you ask me. The sanctions imposed in 2014, after the annexation of Crimea, didn't deter Putin, from continuing what he was doing. He was encouraged to foment trouble in the East, and now that he has recognized those putative republics, those republics have invited him to come in, and he used that pretext to go in, and now he's bombarding the whole place in Ukraine. And the world is helpless in doing something to stop this aggression. Very
interesting, Ambassador. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time. As we try to round off this conversation, why should the rest of the world be afraid, especially when you hear the rhetoric from Putin asking no country to intervene, and if they do so, there will be repercussions?
Well, the countries that really can face him are the NATO countries. And because of this agreement not to involve themselves in countries that are not member states, they are held back, from doing something about it. And that's giving him the courage to continue. So when he's talking about countries, that could do anything, maybe he's referring to countries that are not within NATO. But I believe in due course, when the war widens, it's not unlikely that you're going to have mercenaries, coming from the West and pouring in. And of course, Western weapons will keep coming in. And I don't believe, that even if Putin conquers the whole of Ukraine, that they can keep it for long. My hunch is that he's likely to put in place a puppet government while still recognizing the breakaway republics of Donetsk and Luhansk. That way, hopefully, he thinks the world will forget. But I think it is more difficult than that. It's not likely to end the way he thinks it's going to end.
Very interesting analysis there, Ambassador Frankie. So we must thank you for joining us on the show to actually give us a very broad perspective on all of this, and I really enjoyed that. Thank you for joining us on the show. Well, that's how it's been for this edition of the Arise interview. Do join us again tomorrow from me and the entire team here in Abuja. Goodbye, and thank you for watching. I'm Somna Sambo.